Why is she even still alive? And the laugh that followed wasn't loud, wasn't cruel in an obvious way.
No, it was worse. It was sharp, precise. A little blade made of breath and carelessness, sliding right between my ribs. I stood behind the wooden gate holding a glass dish of peach cobbler, still warm from the oven. The heat of it seeped through the towel I'd wrapped around it, warming my palms, grounding me. My hands didn't tremble, not yet. But something inside me shifted, slanted, cracked, the soundless shattering of something I had carried for far too long. I didn't leave. I could have. Any other woman might have turned around, taken that cobbler home, eaten it alone in her kitchen with the lights off and the blinds closed. But I have always been stubborn, for better or worse. And I refused to let them dictate when I came or went. So I walked through that backyard like I hadn't heard a thing. The string lights hung low across the patio, glowing soft and warm like the homes in the movies where families loved each other properly. The picnic tables were arranged in a careful, curated mess, mismatched chairs, tablecloths with lemon prints, bowls of chips sweating in the sun. People milled around, plates in hand, drinks sloshing as they laughed too loudly at jokes too small. Some of them were my blood. Some were strangers I'd never met, friends of Carl's, neighbors of Jody's, faces that blended into one another like wallpaper. But none of them turned toward me. None of them smiled. Then someone cleared her throat, a little cough meant to sound welcoming but dripping with surprise. "Oh, Mabel, we didn't know you were coming." It was Jody, my son's wife, and the same voice that had spoken behind the fence. I held up the cobbler just a little. "I brought dessert." "Oh," she said again, tighter this time. "That's nice." But no one stepped forward to take the dish. No one made room. No one said, "Let me help you, Mom." Not even Carl, who stood only a few feet away, drinking beer with two men who had their baseball caps on backward like overgrown teenagers. "Fine." I found a spot at the far end of the table, the one with the plastic folding chair that always wobbled. I lowered myself onto it carefully, because my knees aren't what they used to be, and the chair creaked as if complaining about my weight or my presence or both. The air smelled of grilled meat, citronella candles, and a hint of the cheap perfume Jody liked to spray on the patio cushions. A speaker played music, something loud, fast, filled with electronic beats and lyrics that repeated the same three words. No melody, no soul, just noise. They laughed, ate, passed dishes across one another. They toasted. They shouted across the yard, weaving around me like water around a stone. I sat, I watched. At one point, Carl raised his beer and announced loudly to family. Glasses clinked. Cheering followed. But not a single person looked toward me, not even my own son. The children, my grandchildren, ran past me 3 times, chasing a bubble machine someone had set up near the fence. Not once did they stop. Not once did they glance my way. Not once did they say, "Hi, Grandma," the way they used to when they were little and still believed sweetness was something you gave freely. I wondered if they even recognized me without the grocery bags I used to bring, filled with gummy worms and fruit snacks and tiny juice boxes. Eventually, Jody approached. She leaned down, wearing the tight-lipped smile she saves for Christmas photos and PTA meetings. "Did you want a plate?" I looked up at her. "I'm fine." She nodded too quickly, as if relieved, and walked away before I could add anything else, not that she would have listened. The afternoon stretched on like a piece of old rubber, thin, brittle, ready to snap. I stayed until the very end because leaving early would have felt like surrender, and I have never surrendered easily. When they started moving indoors, I helped stack plates. I folded napkins. I wiped down the sticky table with a damp paper towel. No one asked me to, no one thanked me. It's what I'd always done, tidy up quietly in the background while others lived loudly in the foreground. When I finished, I picked up my empty glass dish, still warm from the afternoon sun, and held it against my chest. Then I walked out, not fast, not slow, just steady, not in anger, not in sorrow, but with a decision. A decision born from a single overheard sentence, a truth that had been whispered behind fences and closed doors for years, maybe decades. A truth I finally allowed myself to hear. As I stepped through the gate and onto the sidewalk, I realized something. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a family that no longer wanted me. And that day, that hot, indifferent, peach cobbler afternoon, was the day I decided to stop begging for crumbs of affection. The truth cut deep, but sometimes the cut is exactly what sets you free. And freedom, I would learn, was waiting for me just beyond that gate, in a place I had never thought to look inside myself. But I didn't know then that the real unraveling, the real awakening, would begin the very next morning. The next morning, I made coffee in my smallest pot, just enough for 1 cup. That was all I needed, and truthfully, all I could stomach. The house felt unusually still, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. The quiet wasn't new, but that morning it felt different, sharper, clearer, almost expectant. I settled at the small table beside the window. The same table where Carl used to sprawl out with his homework, his legs dangling, too long for the child-sized chair he refused to give up. I used to watch him scribble math problems with the kind of seriousness only a child can manage, tongue between his teeth, brow furrowed. Back then he needed me, and I loved being needed. Now he tolerated me, barely. The cobbler dish from yesterday sat clean and dry inside the cupboard, tucked neatly between the casserole pan and the old mixing bowl with a tiny crack running along its rim. I had washed the dish, dried it, and put it away as if nothing unusual had happened, as if I hadn't heard my own daughter-in-law wondering out loud why I was still alive. I didn't speak to anyone that Sunday. I didn't want to. Later that morning, I went outside to bring in the mail, but the small stack of envelopes felt heavier than usual. Bills, advertisements, a magazine I never subscribed to but somehow kept receiving. I didn't open any of it. I wasn't ready to see Carl's name on the electricity bill again. Some part of me still believed I was living with him, not merely in the same house he and Jody now controlled. That house had been mine once. Or at least it had felt like it. I remembered the day I handed Carl the envelope with the down payment, $40,000 from my retirement account. I'd spent years saving it, years imagining a small cabin in the mountains or a tiny condo near the lake where I could grow herbs and sit in the sun without interruption. But Carl needed help, he'd said. He wanted a home, a real one, a place to build a family. I had looked at him then, my son, tall and hopeful, still carrying the remnants of the boy he once was, and I couldn't say no. Just to help you get started, I had told him, and I meant those words with every part of me. But money has a way of changing things, especially when pride gets tangled in the knots. That Sunday afternoon, after emptying the mailbox, I walked back inside and went straight to my filing cabinet. I'm not sure what I was looking for. Perhaps answers. Perhaps proof that I hadn't imagined all the sacrifices, all the love poured into the foundation of a house I no longer felt welcome in. I pulled out the folder labeled Carl House. Inside was the purchase agreement, the deed, the signed letter I'd written long ago, gifting the money with no expectation of repayment. Because you're my son, I had written at the end. Seeing those words in my own handwriting felt like a stab. They came from a version of myself I no longer recognized. Someone hopeful, someone trusting, someone willing to pour her life savings into a future that never intended to include her. My eyes traced each signature, each date, every line that confirmed what I already knew. The house was theirs. I had given it freely. I had given it with love. And now I lived inside it like a guest no one had invited. That evening, with the folder still open on the table, I picked up my phone and called a woman named Lena. She used to work in probate, sharp as a tack and blunt as a rolling pin. We met years ago at a bridge club back when I still believed in hobbies and friendships and gatherings filled with laughter instead of tension. She answered on the second ring. "Mabel, everything all right? I have questions," I said, "about property. Gifts, wills, powers of attorney." She didn't ask why, didn't pry or prod or offer pity. "Come by tomorrow," she said. "Bring all your documents." And that was that. That night I slept better than I had in months. Not because I felt peaceful, not exactly, but because something inside me had shifted. Not healed, no, that would take more time than I could measure, but aligned. As though the small gears that once spun in frantic circles had finally clicked into place. The next morning, I dressed carefully before heading to Lena's house. I put on my iron slacks, my nicer blouse, and a coat that was much too warm for early spring. But when you're about to change the shape of your life, you wear something with buttons, something with structure, something that tells the world you mean what you say, even if you haven't said it yet. Lena's home smelled like lemon cleaner and peppermint tea. She had always been tidy, precise, efficient. The kind of person who labels everything from spices to storage bins and somehow never loses anything. She spread my documents across her kitchen table, adjusting her glasses as she skimmed through them. Every so often she made a small sound, a soft click of her tongue, a low hum in her throat. Finally, she spoke. No written expectations, no shared title, everything was gifted, which means you cannot reclaim the house. I know, I said, I never wanted to take anything back. Lena nodded. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. She explained what I still controlled. My accounts, my estate, my medical decisions. She talked about wills and beneficiaries and the importance of updating every single document. Then she slid a checklist across the table. You can't change what you gave, she said, but you can change what happens next. I folded the checklist in half and tucked it inside my purse. Later that afternoon, back at home, I sat once again at the kitchen table. No TV, no radio, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawn mower somewhere down the street. I took out a clean sheet of paper and wrote Carl's name at the top. Then I drew a single line through it. The sound of the pen dragging across the paper was softer than I expected, but final all the same. On Wednesday, I baked a pie I didn't intend to share. Blueberry with lemon zest, my best recipe. The one I used to make for birthdays and Thanksgivings and family gatherings that now felt more like obligations than celebrations. This time, the pie was just for me. No occasion, no reason, no witnesses. I sat on the porch while it cooled, my knees covered by the old Afghan Doris gave me before she passed. The street was calm, peaceful even. A pair of children rode their bikes in slow loops. Someone mowed their lawn in the distance. A dog barked at a squirrel climbing a tree. Nothing big happened that afternoon, but something small did. I chose myself, and I didn't feel guilty for it. As the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, I whispered softly into the quiet air, "This is where things begin to change." And I meant it. Around 4 in the afternoon, I heard the familiar crunch of tires rolling over gravel. When I looked through the window, I recognized the car immediately. It pulled into the driveway across the street with the same confidence it always had, as if the house itself exhaled when it arrived. It was Michelle, Jody's sister, stepping out with a tote bag bursting with groceries, a loaf of bread peeking out the top, and a bottle of wine dangling from her fingers. She didn't hesitate, not even for a second, before marching up to the door. One knock, just one, and then she let herself in the way people do when they know they belong. I stood there a little longer than I should have, watching a door I hadn't walked through in nearly 4 months. Not since Ruby's birthday. Even then, they sat me near the trash bin outside. "So you won't be too close to the music, Mom," Carl had said. He said it like it was thoughtful, like he was protecting me. Ruby didn't even open my gift until after I'd left. A picture book I'd hand-stitched myself. Inside the cover, I'd written a small note to Ruby with all the love a grandma can fit on a page. She never mentioned it. No one did. Since then, I'd seen them twice. Once at the grocery store. Carl hurried as if late for something, though his cart was half full and his face didn't look rushed at all. Jody pretended not to notice me standing there between the apples and the oranges. She looked right through me like I was a cardboard cutout set up for a sale. The second time was at the library. Ruby walked right past me. No pause, no smile, not even the polite wave children give to strangers. Just a quick glance, the kind you give to someone you think you might know but can't place. In that moment, I was no longer her grandmother. I was background noise. And still in my hallway, I kept a drawer filled with tiny notebooks, stickers, little treasures I'd saved for the children. For years, I filled it faithfully. Every season, something new, every holiday, something small but thoughtful. That day, I emptied it, every last thing. I placed it all in a paper bag and set it by the curb with the recycling. I watched the bag sit there for hours. The wind nudged the edges of it, but no one came near it. No curious child, no neighbor, it sat untouched, just like me. Later that evening, my phone buzzed, a message from Carl. "Hey, Jod says she might have hurt your feelings on Sunday, didn't mean anything by it. She was just tired, you know how family events can be." I read it once, then again, slower. Something in me shifted. I didn't reply. I didn't save it. I didn't ask him to explain. I deleted it. I had spent too many years archiving excuses, saving them like museum exhibits, labeling them with reasons. "He didn't mean it," she stressed. "They're busy." I patted their carelessness with softness, hoping the truth would hurt less if I wrapped it gently, but no more. At 7, there was a knock on the door. For half a second, less really, a foolish part of my heart fluttered. Maybe. But when I opened it, it was only Kay from next door, holding a container of lentil soup and looking slightly frazzled. "Have you seen my cat?" she asked without ceremony. I hadn't, but I invited her in anyway. We sat in the kitchen and shared a slice of pie I had made earlier that day. She didn't ask about Carl. She didn't ask why my eyes looked tired or why the rest of the pie sat untouched. She just ate, sighed happily, and said the pie was so good it made her knees hum. I laughed, really laughed. The kind of laugh that releases something inside you, something you didn't realize had been clenched for so long. After she left, the house fell silent again. I walked down the hallway and paused in front of a framed photograph. Me and Carl. 1987. He was 8 years old, missing a front tooth, smiling wide, leaning against me like I was the entire world. I lifted the frame, felt the familiar weight, and whispered to the boy in the picture, "I miss you." Not the man, the boy? My voice cracked on the last word. I turned the photo face down, then I walked to my desk and pulled out an envelope labeled legal. Inside were my will, my medical directives, and the durable power of attorney Carl had signed after my fall 3 years ago. The one he never asked about again, not once, not even when the doctor suggested I might need more help. I sat there with those papers on my lap, feeling the room darken around me. The house hummed quietly, the refrigerator, the clock, the soft buzz of a streetlight outside. Life kept moving, even when the heart struggled to catch up. Tomorrow I would go back to Lena, I would talk to her. I would fix what needed fixing, not with Carl, but with myself. But for that moment, I stayed still in the dark, saying goodbye to a version of my family that only existed in memory. A version I'd been chasing long after it had vanished. And as the clock ticked softly in the background, I realized something. Letting go doesn't make you unloving, it makes you honest. And honesty, well, that's where the next part of my story begins. Lena's office had the kind of quiet that makes you breathe slower the moment you step in, not the awkward waiting room kind of silence. No. This was softer, deliberate, almost warm. Like the room itself was telling you, take your time, you're safe here. Her space was tidy in the way only people who deal with paperwork for a living can manage. A desk lined with flawless stacks of files, a mug that read I read contracts for fun, and a jar of peppermint candies sitting there like decoration. Nobody ever seemed to touch them. I set my purse down gently and pulled out the document I had folded and unfolded at least a dozen times the night before. The durable power of attorney Carl signed years back. The same one he forgot about the minute I stopped being convenient. "I want to start with this," I said, sliding the papers across her desk. "Revoke it, today?" Lena looked at me over her reading glasses, not judging, just measuring the weight behind my voice. "You sure about that, Mabel? That's a big move." "I'm not guessing," I said. "I'm done." That was all she needed. She nodded once, a clean, decisive nod, the kind attorneys give when they understand more than you're saying. "All right," she murmured, pulling the paper toward her. "We'll file a revocation this morning. I'll notarize everything myself." While she printed the forms, I sat back in the chair. My fingers weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt steady, like someone who had finally stopped trying to hold up a wall by herself. "This isn't about payback," I said. It surprised even me that I said it out loud. "It usually isn't," Lena replied without looking up. "It's about balance." When the stack of forms was ready, she placed them neatly in front of me. "And the will?" she asked. I exhaled. "I want Carl removed, not just as executor, completely." This time she paused a second longer. "You want him cut out of the inheritance entirely?" I nodded slowly. "He has a family, a house. A life built on things I already helped with. I'm not mad. I'm just done financing people who treat me like background noise." She didn't argue. Didn't try to convince me to soften the blow. She simply opened a blank template and typed my new instructions. "Who should take his place?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But someone who actually sees me. Maybe even someone who doesn't share my DNA. I can recommend a couple of neutral executors," she said. "We'll leave it open for now." I reached into my purse again, pulling out a worn brochure from years ago. A place I hadn't spoken about in decades, the women's shelter on Greenway Avenue. The place that saved me when Carl was still a toddler and my life felt like a locked room with no windows. "This is where I want the house money to go," I told her. "All of it, they'll know what to do with it." Lena didn't say anything, but her eyes softened in that quiet, respectful way. She typed the last lines, printed the new pages, and spun them toward me. I signed my name with slow, steady strokes. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When she notarized everything and handed me my packet, she walked me to the door. "If any of this starts feeling heavy," she said, "you call me." "I won't," I whispered, and I meant it. The air outside felt sharper than usual, like the wind had edges. I pulled my coat close around me and walked to my car with the kind of certainty I hadn't felt in years. When I got home, the answering machine's red light blinked like an irritated heartbeat. One new message. "Hey mom, Jody said you were acting weird at the barbecue, not sure what's going on with this legal stuff. Anyway, call me back, okay?" I didn't listen twice. I didn't save it, I deleted it, then I blocked his number. Clean cut. The next morning, a locksmith came by, young kid, maybe 22, with polite eyes and a nervous smile. He changed the locks quickly and handed me the new keys. "You want any extras?" he asked. "4," I said. He didn't ask why. People raised right never do. That night when I slid the deadbolt shut, it sounded different, heavier, final in the best way. I slept without waking once, not from peace exactly, but from quiet certainty. On Saturday, I woke up to the faint smell of rain, the kind that makes everything outside look washed and honest. I pulled on my boots and went out to the garden. The marigolds were drooping like tired shoulders. I trimmed them back carefully, each snip of the shears feeling like a small declaration. I get to take care of what's mine. And I get to choose what isn't. Around noon, I drove to First Mutual Credit Union. The place was calm, just soft printer sounds and the low murmur of employees trying not to disturb anyone's morning. A manager named Trina led me to her office. Middle-aged, warm voice, eyes that didn't rush you. "I'd like to review all the authorized users on my accounts," I said. She clicked through the records. "You have one co-signer and one authorized card holder, Carl J. Hemsworth. That your son?" "Once." Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Would you like him removed?" "I'd like him erased," I said, steady as stone. "Shut down the card, remove all access, issue everything new. New passwords, new questions, new everything. No one touches these accounts but me, and put a security hold so changes can only be made in person." Trina didn't flinch. She typed everything in with practiced precision. While she worked, I stared at the pothos plant on her desk, green, bright, still growing. Carl tried to eat the dirt from my houseplants once when he was a toddler. I'd laughed so hard I nearly dropped him. Strange how memories can sting and warm in the same breath. Trina printed the new documents and handed them to me. "If you'd like help setting up a trust later, we can do that too." "Maybe someday," I said. "Right now, I'm just cleaning house." When I drove home, I didn't feel victorious. I felt rinsed, like someone had poured cool water over the parts of me I'd let gather dust. Back home, I pulled out the fireproof lockbox, my life in documents. I organized each paper with care, and then gently I removed Carl's birth certificate, not to throw it away, not to destroy it, just to remove it from the files that still mattered. I placed it in a folder labeled History and slid it into the bottom drawer. That evening, I opened my old address book. The pages were yellowed, some corners bent. I flipped to see. Carl Jody Ruby Trent. I drew a single, quiet line through each name. Then I turned to L and added, Lena Moore, attorney and advocate. That night, I slept with the windows cracked open. The rain tapped steady on the roof, like a reminder that storms aren't always a warning, sometimes they're a cleansing. And I knew the next chapter of my life was already turning itself. Kay stopped by that Sunday morning with warm banana muffins wrapped in a dish towel, the kind still steaming when you peel them open. We sat at my kitchen table talking about the stray cat that had decided her porch was home. Big gray thing with one torn ear and a slow walk like a retired boxer. We named him Vernon just because it made us laugh. She stayed until lunchtime, long enough for the kitchen to smell like baked bananas and friendship. When she finally headed out, promising to bring Vernon a can of tuna later, the house didn't feel quite as heavy as it usually did. After she left, I picked up the Sunday paper. I hadn't read it front to back in years, but that day I did. I circled an ad in the classifieds, small apartment on the edge of town. 1 floor, 2 rooms, washer and dryer, nothing fancy, nothing loud, just enough. I clipped the ad and stuck it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Not because I was planning to pack my bags tomorrow. I wasn't running. I was preparing. Because the next time someone whispered behind a fence, "Why is she still alive?" I wanted the answer to ring clear. To reclaim everything I handed out too cheap. On Monday morning, I called the real estate attorney Lena had recommended. A man named Charles Lindell. His voice had that calm, steady rumble like someone who reads long documents for fun and doesn't scare easy. I told him I needed to discuss property, titles, and long-term planning. He gave me an appointment for Thursday. So the next few days, I built my own little command center at the dining table. I gathered every document that proved this house, this life, these years weren't gifts, they were investments. Receipts from repairs Carl said he'd get to eventually. The new furnace, the roof during the big storm year, plumbing bills, photos. Tax records, deeds, each paper was evidence of who had carried what. By Wednesday night, the table looked like the war room of a woman no one thought would ever fight back. The phone rang twice that evening. The caller ID flashed, blocked. I let the machine take it. A second later, Jody's voice poured through the speakers. Mabel, hey, we don't really know what's going on. Carl's been trying to reach you, and Ruby's been asking where you've been. We're worried. Can you please call us back? I clicked the machine off mid-sentence. They weren't worried. They were unsettled. And unsettled isn't the same as caring. Ruby hadn't asked about me. She hadn't even texted me on my birthday. That day, I had lit a candle on a single cupcake and pretended it didn't matter. Their silence wasn't new. It just wasn't loud enough to hear until now. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully, navy cardigan, the one with the mother-of-pearl buttons that catch the light like tiny moons. I arrived at Charles's office 20 minutes early and waited in a soft leather chair until his receptionist led me inside. Charles stood when I stepped in. He was tall, trim beard, calm eyes. The kind of person who pays attention without making you feel judged. "What can I do for you, Miss Hemsworth?" he asked once we sat. "I want the house moved into a trust," I said. "A trust I control entirely. Nobody in my family gets access. Not now, not after I'm gone." He nodded like he'd been expecting that. "A living trust is simple," he said. "You'll serve as trustee and beneficiary while you're alive. When you pass, the house goes where you direct it." "I want it sold immediately," I said. "Every penny of the sale goes to Greenway Women's Shelter." He raised his eyebrows, but only slightly. "No family beneficiaries at all?" "None," I said. "Not a cent." He didn't argue or ask if I was sure. Instead, he wrote it down with neat little strokes. "I also want Carl removed from anything he's tied to," I added. "Insurance, accounts, proxies, if his name appears, erase it." "All right," he said. "We'll draft the amendments. You'll need to sign today. We can notarize in-house." We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing clauses, selecting contingencies, ensuring no loophole could swallow my intentions whole. Charles explained everything simply but thoroughly. When we finished, he handed me a slim binder, clean, organized, final. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "The rest we'll take care of this week." I thanked him, and when I stepped outside, I felt taller somehow. Not in body, my bones were still my bones, but in certainty. On the drive home, I passed the bakery on Main Street and on impulse pulled in. A girl behind the counter with pink hair handed me a lemon tart and called me sweetheart. She gave me a free cookie for being adorable. I ate the tart in the car with sunlight warming my lap through the windshield. It tasted like something I hadn't had in a long time, like being seen. When I got home, I set the binder on the kitchen table and reread everything. My signature, my directives, my voice on paper, nothing vague, nothing soft. Not this time. Later, just as the sun dipped behind the neighbor's maple tree, a car rolled into my driveway. Carl. He sat there for a second like a kid outside the principal's office. Then he got out, slow, hesitant. He walked to my door, knocked once, twice. "Mom," he said, "can you open up, please?" I didn't move. "You changed the locks, you blocked my number, I don't understand what I did." His voice wavered. "Just talk to me, okay? Tell me what's going on." But he wasn't asking about me. He was asking about access, about the doors that used to open for him without a second thought. I stayed silent. After a long minute, he sighed, frustrated, confused, maybe both. Then he walked back to the car, looking smaller than he had when he arrived. When his taillights faded down the street, I finally stood, poured myself a cup of tea. 2 sugars, no milk. My mother used to say, if they can't hear you when you speak softly, trust me, they'll hear the silence twice as loud. That night, for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a door I had finally learned how to close. And somewhere in the quiet, another door, one just for me, started to open. The front yard hadn't looked this put together in years. That Friday morning, I trimmed the hedges, swept the porch, even swapped out the cracked light bulb over the door. Not because anybody was coming over, but because someday soon I'd be leaving. And I wanted the house to know it wasn't the one I was walking away from. It was never the house's fault. I'd lived under that roof for 43 years. Moved in when Carl was 5, back when his favorite thing in the world was lining up his toy dinosaurs across the windowsill and giving them people names. This one's Rebecca, and this one is Mrs. Fulton. It had been my dream home once. 3 bedrooms, a big front window that caught the morning sun, and a skinny attic I turned into a sewing room. I painted every wall myself. After Frank passed, I tiled the whole kitchen floor alone. And when the neighbors told me to just wait for your son to help, I learned how to clean the gutter screens by myself. I stopped waiting a long time ago. That afternoon, I walked room to room with a little notepad, jotting down what to keep and what to let go. In the guest room stood the old dresser I once offered Carl and Jody when they said they needed furniture. They turned it down because it looked too dated. Funny, they never turned down anything else of mine. In the hallway hung a cross-stitch my sister made, "Peace lives here." It had been there so long that when I lifted it, the wall behind it was brighter than the paint around it. Then I stepped into Carl's childhood room. The curtains were still the ones with tiny sailboats drifting across them. I always meant to replace them, but life kept getting in the way. In his closet sat a dusty baseball card binder and a shoebox labeled private. I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the old window. The apple tree in the backyard leaned left these days, age tugging at its trunk, but every spring it still pushed out blossoms like it refused to accept its own exhaustion. I stayed there nearly an hour, letting memories wander through. The time Carl climbed that apple tree and got stuck halfway up, screaming like a siren until I came out barefoot, dragging the ladder behind me. The way he hugged me after I got him down, arms tight, face buried, heart still thumping. "Don't tell anyone," he whispered, and I never did. I remembered the first day he brought Jody home. The way her eyes scanned my house like she was checking the star rating of a motel. "It's cozy," she said. I guess that was her version of a compliment. I remembered holding Ruby for the very first time, her little face wrinkled and red, Carl's eyes shining like he'd never seen anything more perfect. And I remembered the Christmas Jody told me not to bring food because the kids don't eat old-fashioned stuff. I brought a pie anyway. Ruby didn't touch it. Trent said it tasted like soap. They all laughed. That was the year I stopped baking for their holidays, but I never stopped baking. I stood up and wrote on my notepad, "Leave the curtains, take the quilt." Down in the kitchen, I opened the cabinet above the stove, my baking cabinet. Vanilla extract, cinnamon, brown sugar, those heavy metal measuring cups Frank bought me for our 10th anniversary. I wrapped them carefully and placed them in a padded box labeled Keep. The next morning, I called the apartment complex in the newspaper listing. A woman named Teresa answered, her voice warm, like the kind of person who puts stickers on envelopes just because. "Yes, we have a 1-bedroom open," she said. "Ground floor, lots of sunlight, pretty quiet over here, mostly teachers and retirees." "Do you allow cats?" I asked. "We do." I didn't own a cat, but I liked knowing I had the option. I scheduled a viewing for Tuesday. That night, I sat on the front porch with a blanket draped over my legs and a mug of hot tea. The street was still except for a wind chime tinkling next door and the soft hum of porch lights flicking on across the block. I thought of all the nights I'd sat out here waiting, for headlights that never appeared, for footsteps that never came up the walk, for someone to remember the woman who raised them. But that night was different. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was just existing, just breathing, just me and the quiet and the cool evening air. I thought about Carl. I didn't miss him, not the man he'd become. I missed the little boy he used to be, the kid who built Lego castles on my coffee table, the kid who held my hand a little too tight crossing busy streets. That boy was long gone. Maybe one day I'd grieve him properly. But not now. Right now I had boxes to pack. On Sunday evening the phone buzzed. Not Carl, Ruby. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. "Is this still your number?" "It is." She hesitated like she was standing on a diving board deciding whether to jump. "I found it in one of Dad's old phones," she said. "He didn't know." Another pause. "I wanted to say I'm sorry about the backyard, about, well, everything." I didn't rush to soothe her. For years, my instinct had been to patch other people's feelings before they had to sit in them, but that instinct had been evicted recently. What exactly are you sorry for? I asked. She swallowed. For not talking to you. For pretending I didn't see you at the library, for laughing when Mom joked about you. Her voice cracked. It wasn't funny, I just wanted to fit in. You just wanted to belong, I said gently. Yes, I didn't hand her forgiveness like a free sample, that's not how healing works, but I did tell her, thank you for calling. Can I see you? She asked. Just me, not Dad, not Mom. I thought about the empty pie drawer. The Christmas cards that went unanswered. The tiny hand she used to fit in mine. All right, I said, come by tomorrow after school. She exhaled like the whole world had been sitting on her chest. I'll be there. I promise. When I hung up, I sat quietly, the tea cooling between my palms. Monday arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of soft, moody weather that makes everything feel like it's moving in slow motion. I baked banana bread. Not for anyone, just because it made the house smell alive. At 4:12, she knocked. Ruby stood on the porch wearing an oversized hoodie and sneakers with loose laces. Her eyes looked a little swollen, not from tears, but from being 16. I wasn't sure you'd open the door, she whispered. I wasn't sure you'd knock, I said. And that was the moment everything shifted, not fixed, not erased, just shifted, like a door easing open after sticking for years. What I didn't know then was that her knock wasn't the only one coming, and the next one would force me to decide what kind of ending I wanted for them, and for myself. Inside, we settled at the kitchen table like two people trying to relearn a language we'd once spoken fluently. Ruby picked at the banana bread crumbs with the edge of her nail, and I poured us both tea, the kind that smells like quiet mornings and good intentions. Mom says you've gone crazy, she said after a moment, not accusing, just repeating a rumor she didn't quite believe. She says you're cutting us out. I'm not cutting, I said slowly. I'm choosing. And trust me, sweet girl, there's a huge difference. She nodded in that way teenagers do, like they're absorbing a truth they aren't sure they're ready for. I don't hate you, I added. She looked up, eyes softening. I don't hate you either, she whispered. I think I copied how they acted, and I never questioned it until I started missing you. That sentence folded something inside me, like creases smoothing out in an old sheet. I want to come back, she said, if that's allowed. I studied her, this girl who carried the faintest echo of who her father used to be before the world hardened him. You can come back, I told her. But not for pie or presents or holidays. You come back only for truth, for honesty, for real stuff. I can do that, she said quickly. She stayed for about an hour. We didn't talk about Carl or Jody. I'd stopped giving away free airtime to people who didn't earn it. Instead, we talked about books, her favorite teacher, and a cat she wanted but wasn't allowed to get. When she left, I wrapped her an extra slice of banana bread. She took it like it was a peace treaty. After she walked down the driveway, I watched until she disappeared around the corner. I didn't feel hopeful. Hope is flimsy. I felt honest, and that was better. That night, I wrote in my journal, maybe some doors don't need slamming. Maybe some just need to be gently locked from the inside, with a window cracked open for the ones who show up alone and knock with care. The next few days passed with the soft hush of change settling in. I packed slowly, one drawer at a time, one memory at a time. Not because I was clinging to anything, but because I wanted to know exactly what I was keeping and why. If an item didn't make me feel stronger, it didn't come with me. Thursday morning was the apartment viewing. I woke early, brewed a coffee that could wake the dead, and put on slacks and a blouse. Not to impress anyone, but because starting over deserves clean lines and straight seams. The apartment complex wasn't fancy. Brick buildings, trimmed flower beds, a bench under a linden tree like something out of a postcard nobody brags about, but it felt right. Teresa, the manager, greeted me with a smile that felt like warm bread. Ground floor, she said, unlocking the door to Unit 1 billion. Good light, quiet neighbors. Plenty of space for one. Inside, the air smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The kitchen counter wasn't marble, but it was smooth under my hand. The fridge hummed like it was promising to keep my secrets. I'll take it, I said. Teresa blinked. Don't you want to think it over? I already have. By evening, the paperwork was signed. I scheduled the move for the 1st of the month. 3 weeks, enough time to leave without rushing, enough time to pack gently. That night, sitting among half-filled boxes, I wrote a new address card. Mabel Hemsworth 128 Willow View apt 1 billion no forwarding information for Carl. 2 days later, he showed up. I heard his car before I saw it. When he finally stepped onto the porch, I met him at the door. I didn't open it. "You blocked me," he said. "You changed all your accounts." "Yes. Why?" I looked at his face, older, tired, or maybe I was just finally seeing him clearly. "I heard what Jody said in the backyard, and I heard you laugh." He shifted. "It was a joke." "No, a joke has a punchline. That was something else." "I didn't know you were standing there." "That's the problem, Carl. You never know when I'm there. Or when I'm hurting." He swallowed. "So you're erasing me over one bad afternoon?" "One afternoon?" I almost laughed. "No, that was just the final brushstroke on a painting you started years ago." I said it calmly. "I'm not erasing you. I'm finally choosing myself." He looked past me, maybe searching for old reminders, the table where his school photos once sat, the basket of holiday cards. But the hallway was clear. Clean. "I'll always be your son," he said. "And I'll always be the woman who gave more than she should have," I replied. Then I shut the door, not loud, not angry, just done. I cried afterward exactly 7 minutes. I set a timer. Endings deserve ritual. Afterward, I folded another box and placed it by the door labeled keep. The kitchen table held only what mattered: one teacup, a lamp, a bowl of oranges. Everything else was packed or donated. Sunday afternoon, I hosted tea, the first gathering in years that wasn't demanded by a holiday. Marcia came with her crossword books. Ida arrived overdressed as usual. Nora wore a perfume that smelled like mornings in April. We sat, we sipped, we talked about grocery prices, shoulder pain, and the bus driver who waited while Ida dug for change. No one asked about Carl or Jody. The silence around their names felt like grace. "I'm moving," I told them, 3 eyebrows lifted. "To a small place across town," I said, "by the end of the month." "Does your son know?" Ida asked. "He doesn't need to." Marcia nodded like that was enough explanation for anyone. They stayed an hour, helped wash cups, promised to return. After they left, the house felt full, not empty. Over the next few days, more calls came. Jody's voicemail was icy. "If this is your way of getting attention, it's sad," she said. I deleted it. Hostile, they said. That's what people call a woman who stops apologizing. On Wednesday, a knock came around 10. Hard, rhythmic, practiced. Jody. She walked in without asking, dripping judgment like perfume. "You're spiraling," she said. "Ruby's sneaking around. Carl's upset. You're moving. This is ridiculous." "All true," I said calmly. "You're our family." "I was your convenience," I corrected. She bristled. Then she saw the boxes. "You're really doing this?" "I am. And when you're alone in that apartment, when no one checks on you, I'll still have myself, and that," I said, "is better than being surrounded by people who flinch when I enter a room." She left in a storm of expensive heels. Ruby texted minutes later. "You okay?" I replied, "More than okay." The papers finalized the next morning. Lena called. "You are now the sole decision maker of every inch of your life," she said. "Good," I replied. That afternoon, Ruby arrived with cookies and a magazine quiz. We laughed over our results. She told me she wanted to start a support group for teens who didn't feel at home. "Can I use your name?" she asked. "Only for something true?" Later that night, alone, I held her sketch of a woman at a chessboard, 2 pieces left, still winning. I placed it carefully in the moving box labeled Essentials. Moving day came quietly. Movers in, boxes out. By noon, the house was hollow. I touched the walls once more, thanking them for years they never owed me. I left a key and a note in the drawer. "This house taught me everything. Thank you." Then I walked away. The new apartment smelled like fresh light. The first thing I unpacked was the kettle. The second was Ruby's drawing. That night I sat on the balcony with toast, watching the sky fold into evening. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss Carl's silence. I didn't miss shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. 1 week later, the house sold. I donated the proceeds to the women's shelter for women who run before someone tells them they can't. Days blurred with quiet routines, basil growing in a pot, neighbors waving, letters arriving, some from Ruby, one from Carl. "I don't know how to fix this," he wrote. "I hope one day you'll let me try." I folded it. Put it away, not forgiven, not rejected, just waiting for the truth to show up. On my 73rd birthday, I woke to sunlight on my pillow. No parties, no forced smiles, just peace. I made pancakes, ate them with honey. And when Ruby arrived with tulips and a hand-painted card of 2 porch chairs, one empty, one holding a teacup, I felt something settle inside me. Thanks for keeping a seat for me, she'd written. We drank tea. Talked about her plans. She said I looked different. I feel different, I said. Later, after she left, I sat on the balcony with a book I finally wanted to read, not to prove anything, just because. And that night, closing my journal for the last time, I wrote, I am not waiting at windows anymore. I am not a forgotten guest at someone else's table. I am building my own and leaving the door open only for those who knock with clean hands. If you enjoyed today's story, press like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new chapter from Grandma Stories.